What do you do when your maid of honor steals your fiancé, invites you to their wedding, then has a complete meltdown at the altar? Well, let me tell you exactly what happened when I showed up in a red dress with the most gorgeous man she'd ever seen. You know that moment when your entire world collapses in 60 seconds? Mine happened on a Tuesday morning in Manhattan, holding a cream-colored envelope with gold trim. The kind of envelope that screams expensive wedding, the kind I should have been getting for my own wedding. Instead, I'm staring at Emma Richardson and Jake Morrison cordially invite you to celebrate their union. Emma Richardson, my best friend since college. Jake Morrison, my fiancé of 6 years. Well, ex-fiancé now, the crazy part. They want me there. Front row apparently, because nothing says class like inviting the woman whose life you just torched to watch you light the match. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. How a marketing executive with a corner office in Midtown and what I thought was the perfect life became the villain in someone else's love story. I met Jake at a coffee shop in Soho 6 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of Columbia with my MBA ready to conquer the advertising world. He was this charming guy in a wrinkled button-down who spilled his latte on my presentation folder right before the biggest pitch of my career. Most people would have been furious. But Jake, he bought me a new coffee, helped me reprint everything at Kinko's, and somehow turned my disaster morning into the best day of my life. He waited outside my office building that evening, holding a single sunflower and wearing this sheepish grin that made my knees weak. "How did the pitch go?" he asked. When I told him I'd landed the account, he spun me around right there on the sidewalk like we were in some cheesy romantic movie. Our first date lasted 14 hours. We started with dinner at this tiny Thai place in the village, then walked all over Manhattan talking about everything and nothing. Books we loved, places we wanted to travel, the weird fears we'd never told anyone else. Jake was afraid of butterflies, which I found absolutely adorable. I told him about my recurring nightmare where I showed up to work naked. We ended up on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise, watching the city wake up. And I remember thinking this was it. This was the person I'd been waiting for my entire life. We moved in together after 8 months. I can still remember the day we got our keys to that little one-bedroom in Greenwich Village. Jake carried me over the threshold, which was ridiculous because we were just renting. But he insisted it was practice for the real thing. We spent our first night there eating takeout Chinese on the floor because our furniture wouldn't arrive until the weekend. Those early years were magic. Jake was working as a junior architect at a firm in Brooklyn, designing affordable housing projects that he was genuinely passionate about. I was climbing the ladder at Morrison and Associates, the irony of which wasn't lost on us since we didn't share the same last name yet. We'd meet for lunch in Washington Square Park, steal kisses on subway platforms, stay up all night talking about our dreams. He proposed on our 4th anniversary right back at that coffee shop where we met. I'd been expecting it for months, dropping not-so-subtle hints about ring settings and dream venues. But when he got down on one knee in front of all those strangers, I still started crying like a baby. The ring was perfect. A vintage Art Deco setting he'd found at an estate sale in the Upper East Side with a diamond that caught the light just right. Emma was there for all of it. She'd been my roommate at Columbia, this gorgeous blonde from Connecticut who looked like she belonged in a Ralph Lauren ad but had this wicked sense of humor that kept me laughing for 4 years straight. We were complete opposites. I was the driven one, always stressed about grades and internships. Emma was effortlessly cool, the kind of girl who could show up to class in yesterday's clothes and still look put together. After graduation, we both stayed in the city. Emma went into fashion marketing, working for various luxury brands. She had this enviable job at Bergdorf Goodman, where she got to attend Fashion Week and travel to Paris for buying trips. Her Instagram was a constant stream of champagne toasts and rooftop parties, and beautiful people in beautiful clothes. Emma threw me my surprise 30th birthday party at this chic rooftop bar in Soho. She'd invited everyone I cared about and somehow managed to coordinate with Jake to make sure I thought we were just going to dinner. When I walked into that party and saw all my friends and colleagues, I actually started crying. Happy tears, because I felt so loved and so grateful for the life I'd built. She helped me pick out furniture for our apartment, spent entire weekends with us at flea markets and antique shops. Geeks. She was supposed to be my maid of honor. We had this tradition where we'd meet every Friday at Cafe Grumpy on 23rd Street and dissect our weeks over overpriced matcha lattes. She'd tell me about whatever guy she was dating, and I'd complain about difficult clients or share exciting news about Jake and me. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. How she started asking weird questions about Jake during our coffee dates, whether we were really happy, if I ever thought about what life would be like with someone else, whether Jake and I ever fought about anything serious. I thought she was just being a concerned friend, maybe worried that I was settling down too young. God, I was naive. The first crack in my perfect little world came 4 months ago. Jake started working late more often, coming home after 9 or 10 with elaborate stories about demanding clients and impossible deadlines. He'd always been dedicated to his work, but this was different, distant. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give me these vague answers that didn't really tell me anything. Then there were the little things. Coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, a sweet floral scent that definitely wasn't my signature Joe Malone wood sage and sea salt. When I asked about it, he'd get defensive, say I was being paranoid. Maybe it was from the subway or a coworker who wore too much perfume. Classic gaslighting, right? But I loved him, so I believed him. His phone habits changed too. Jake used to leave his phone lying around everywhere, never thinking twice about it. Suddenly, it was always face down, always with him, always requiring a password I didn't know. When I mentioned it, he said his firm had implemented new security protocols for client confidentiality. Emma started acting strange around the same time, canceling our Friday coffee dates at the last minute, taking forever to respond to texts. When we did hang out, she seemed guilty about something distracted. She'd ask these probing questions about my relationship, then zone out when I was talking. I thought maybe she was going through something with work or dating, but every time I asked, she'd brush me off. The truth hit me like a freight train 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning out Jake's jacket pockets before taking his wool coat to the dry cleaner when I found a receipt. Dinner for 2 at Le Bernardin, a $300 dinner at one of the most romantic restaurants in the city. The same night he told me he was working late on a project presentation. My hands were shaking as I sat on our bed staring at that piece of paper. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a work dinner with a client. Maybe he was planning something special for me and wanted to check out the restaurant first. My rational brain was working overtime, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. But something in my gut told me to look deeper. I know. Invasion of privacy. But I felt like I was drowning, and that phone was the only life raft in sight. And there it was. Months of text messages, photos, hotel receipts, everything laid out in digital black and white, messages that made my stomach turn. Photos of Emma in lingerie I'd helped her pick out, Jake telling her he loved her, Emma sending him pictures from inside my apartment from our apartment while I was at work. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was the way they talked about me. Like I was this obstacle they had to navigate around. This inconvenience in their epic love story. Emma calling me clingy and obsessive. Jake saying I'd never understand him the way she did, that I was too focused on my career to really see him. They'd been meeting at hotels in Midtown during my lunch breaks, taking weekend trips upstate while telling me they were visiting family. Emma had even been wearing my engagement ring in some of the photos, trying it on like she was practicing to be Jake's wife. I sat in our bedroom for 3 hours, reading every message, looking at every photo, watching 6 years of my life crumble into dust. By the time Jake came home that night, I had all the evidence printed out and waiting on our kitchen table. I confronted them separately. Jake broke down completely when he saw the printouts. Started crying, saying it just happened, that he never meant for it to go this far. He begged me not to throw away what we had said. Emma didn't mean anything to him, that it was just physical. All the greatest hits from the cheater's playbook. Emma looked me straight in the eye and said she wasn't sorry, that she'd been in love with Jake since the day she met him at my birthday party 2 years ago, and she was tired of pretending otherwise. She said I'd never deserved him, that I was too selfish and career-focused to make him happy. that she could love him in ways I never could. The engagement ended that night. Jake moved out the next morning, taking only his clothes and his architecture books. I thought that was the end of it, that they'd slink away to build their stolen happiness somewhere I'd never have to see them again. But no, because apparently when you steal your best friend's fiancé, the classy thing to do is invite her to your wedding. The invitation arrived exactly 6 months after our breakup. Perfect timing, right? Just when I was starting to feel like myself again. With a handwritten note on the back in Emma's perfect penmanship. Mel, I know this is complicated, but you've always been important to both of us. We hope you can find it in your heart to be there for our special day. Your friendship means everything to me, and I hope we can move past this. Our special day, like they're announcing a book club meeting instead of flaunting the destruction of my life. My mom thinks I should go. She says it'll give me closure, help me move on once and for all. My sister thinks I should burn the invitation and post the video on TikTok. My therapist just raises her eyebrows and asks how I feel about it, which is exactly the kind of non-answer that makes me want to scream. How do I feel? I feel like I'm living in an alternate universe where up is down and best friends steal fiancés and everyone acts like this is normal. Where the woman who destroyed my life gets to wear white and be celebrated while I'm supposed to smile and clap and wish them well. But here's the thing. They don't know about me. I'm not the same woman who used to cry herself to sleep in Jake's old Columbia t-shirts. I'm not the girl who spent 3 weeks eating nothing but ice cream and questioning every decision I'd ever made. I've been going to therapy twice a week. I've been hitting the gym with a personal trainer who makes me do things I didn't know my body was capable of. I've been remembering who Melanie Carson was before she became half of Melanie and Jake. And that woman, she doesn't run from fights. She doesn't hide in her apartment feeling sorry for herself. That woman shows up. So I made a decision. I'm going to that wedding. Not to cause a scene, not to throw red wine on Emma's dress, though the thought did cross my mind more than once. I'm going because I deserve to reclaim my narrative. I'm going to show up as the best version of myself and remind everyone, including me, exactly what they lost. My therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, had this annoying habit of asking exactly the right questions at exactly the right time. What would showing up powerfully look like to you, Melanie? She asked during our session last Tuesday. We were sitting in her office overlooking Central Park, and I was staring out at the joggers and dog walkers living their normal, uncomplicated lives. What would it mean to honor yourself in this situation? She continued. What would the woman you're becoming do? Honestly, I didn't know. For months, I'd been so focused on what Jake and Emma had taken from me that I forgot to think about what I still had. What I'd always had even before Jake came along and made me forget who I was. My career was thriving. I'd just landed the Nordstrom account at work, beating out 3 other agencies in a competitive pitch. My creative director had pulled me aside and hinted at a promotion to senior account director. I had this amazing apartment in the village that I'd decorated myself, filled with art and books and plants that somehow managed to survive my black thumb. I had friends who actually cared about me. Real friends, not people who were secretly plotting to steal my life while pretending to support me. The transformation started small. I threw out everything that reminded me of Jake, his Columbia University mug that had been sitting in our kitchen cabinet for years. The books he'd left behind, dog-eared copies of architecture theory that I'd never understood but kept because they smelled like him. That stupid throw pillow he insisted we needed for the couch, even though it clashed with everything else. I even got rid of the coffee table we'd picked out together at West Elm. We'd spent an entire Saturday afternoon debating between the walnut and the oak finish, finally settling on walnut because Jake said it would age better. Everything had to go. Every physical reminder of the life we'd planned together. The apartment felt empty for a while, but also clean, like I was finally able to breathe again. Then I called Sophie, my friend from work, who'd been telling me for months that I needed to get back out there. Sophie Martinez was one of those people who could sell sand to a beach, a senior art director with an eye for style and zero tolerance for self-pity. When she offered to help me prepare for this wedding, I knew I was in good hands. "We're not just getting you ready for a wedding," she announced, barging into my apartment with shopping bags from what looked like every store in Soho. "We're preparing you for your comeback tour, Your ex-fiancé and your former best friend are about to learn what a mistake looks like. Sophie had this theory that transformation was 70% confidence and 30% good lighting. But first, she said, dumping the contents of a Sephora bag onto my kitchen counter, "We're going to make sure you look so good that Jake forgets how to breathe." The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Sophie dragged me to sample sales in Chelsea, where I tried on more clothes than I'd worn in the past 6 months. She had this uncanny ability to pull pieces I never would have considered and somehow make them look perfect on me. "You've been dressing like someone's girlfriend for too long," she declared, holding up a red dress that looked like it cost more than my rent. "Time to dress like the CEO of your own life." The red dress was a revelation. It wasn't flashy or inappropriate, but it was powerful. The kind of dress that made you stand up straighter, speak more confidently, command attention without demanding it. When I tried it on in the fitting room at Barney's, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Sophie also convinced me to try a personal trainer, this intimidating woman named Carmen Rodriguez, who ran a boutique gym in the Flatiron district. Carmen was about 5 feet tall and could probably bench press a small car. She took one look at me and said, "Heartbreak body transformation, I've got you covered." The first session nearly killed me. Carmen made me do burpees until I thought I might actually die, then followed it up with something she called rage yoga, which was exactly what it sounded like. But something weird happened during all that suffering. I started feeling stronger. Not just physically, but mentally too. "Pain is temporary," Carmen would bark at me while I struggled through another set of mountain climbers. "But strength is forever. And right now, baby girl, you're building the kind of strength that's going to serve you for the rest of your life." She was right. Every morning, I woke up sore, but proud. Every workout I completed was proof that I could do hard things, that I could push through discomfort and come out stronger on the other side. I was coming out of a particularly brutal training session 3 weeks before the wedding when I literally ran into him. And I mean literally. I was so exhausted I wasn't watching where I was going, and I crashed straight into this guy, carrying what looked like enough art supplies to stock a small studio. Paint tubes went flying everywhere. Brushes scattered across the sidewalk like pickup sticks. I was mortified, apologizing profusely while trying to gather up his stuff with shaking hands. My post-workout hair was a disaster. I was wearing the least flattering athletic wear known to mankind, and I probably smelled like the gym. But when I looked up to hand him his brushes, I was struck by these incredibly kind brown eyes and a smile that made my stomach do this weird little flip. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and paint stains on his fingers that suggested this wasn't his first art supply catastrophe. "I'm so sorry," I said, probably looking like a sweaty disaster. I wasn't paying attention, and I just, "Hey, it's okay," he said, and his voice had this warm, gravelly quality that made me want to keep talking to him. "No harm done. I'm Matt, by the way, and you look like someone who just survived a battle." I laughed, despite myself. "Melanie, and that's basically what happened. My trainer's trying to kill me, I think." "Well, you're still standing, so I'd say you're winning." There was something about Matt that was immediately disarming. Maybe it was the way he didn't seem to care that I was a sweaty mess, or how he helped me pick up his art supplies without making me feel worse about the collision. He had this easy confidence that felt genuine, not performed. "Let me guess," he said, gathering up the last of his paint tubes. "Carmen Rodriguez. You know Carmen. She trained my sister last year. Nearly killed her too, but she swears it was the best thing that ever happened to her." He grinned. "I'm Matt Hendricks, by the way. I run a studio about 3 blocks from here." When he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, I surprised myself by saying yes. Not because I was trying to get back at Jake or because I needed a date to the wedding, but because something about Matt made me curious. It had been so long since I'd felt curious about anyone. Our first date was supposed to be just coffee. We met at this little place called 9th Street Espresso, and I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since high school. I'd changed clothes 3 times, practiced conversation starters in the mirror, and showed up 15 minutes early because I couldn't sit still at home. But the moment Matt walked in, all that nervous energy just evaporated. He was wearing a worn denim jacket and had paint under his fingernails, and when he smiled at me, I felt something I'd forgotten I was capable of feeling. Genuine attraction to someone who wasn't Jake. Coffee turned into lunch at this tiny sandwich shop down the street. Lunch turned into a walk through Washington Square Park, then dinner at this hole-in-the-wall Italian place in the village where the owner knew Matt by name and insisted on bringing us free tiramisu. We talked for 8 hours straight. 8 hours! I hadn't talked to anyone like that since, well, maybe ever. Not even Jake, if I was being honest. Matt was an artist, but not the starving kind. He was a successful muralist who'd done work all over the city. He showed me photos on his phone of this incredible piece he'd painted on the side of a building in Brooklyn, a swirl of blues and greens that looked like ocean waves frozen in motion. "I like creating beauty in unexpected places," he said, scrolling through images of his work. "Taking something ordinary like a blank wall or an abandoned building and turning it into something that makes people stop and look twice." When he talked about his art, his whole face lit up. His hands moved as he described his latest project, a mural for a community center in Queens that would incorporate input from local kids. He wasn't pretentious about it, didn't use art world jargon, or act like he was saving the world with his paintbrush. He just genuinely loved what he did. But what really got me was how he listened. Really listened. Not like he was waiting for his turn to talk, but like he genuinely cared about what I had to say. When I told him about my work, he asked follow-up questions that showed he was actually paying attention. When I mentioned my love of vintage jazz, he wanted to know my favorite musicians and whether I'd been to any good shows lately. I told him about Jake and Emma on our third date. We were walking along the High Line at sunset, and the conversation had turned to past relationships. I was nervous because, let's face it, my best friend stole my fiancé isn't exactly light dinner conversation. "That must have been devastating," Matt said when I finished my story. Not, "You're better off without him," or "Everything happens for a reason," or any of the other platitudes people had been throwing at me for months. Just genuine concern about how I was doing. "It was," I said, "but I'm working through it. Therapy, exercise, retail therapy." I gestured to the new dress I was wearing, another Sophie acquisition. "And in a few weeks, I'm going to their wedding." Matt stopped walking and turned to look at me. "You're going to their wedding. I know it sounds crazy, but I need to do this. I need to show up for myself, prove that I'm not the broken woman they left behind." "That doesn't sound crazy at all," Matt said. "It sounds brave, but you shouldn't have to do it alone." And that's how Matt became my date to my ex-fiancé's wedding to my former best friend. If someone had told me 6 months ago that this would be my life, I would have laughed. But sitting across from Matt at that tiny restaurant, watching him get excited about some mural he was planning for a school in the Bronx, I realized something that changed everything. Maybe Jake leaving wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. Maybe it was the thing that had to happen for me to find something real. The night before the wedding, Sophie came over for final preparations. She'd been my unofficial styling consultant for weeks, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like game day. "Remember," she said, zipping me into the red dress for what felt like the 100th fitting, "you're not going there to prove anything to them. You're going there to prove something to yourself." I looked at myself in the full-length mirror in my bedroom. 3 months ago, I was a woman who'd been discarded, thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. Tonight, I was someone who knew her worth. "You ready for this?" Sophie asked. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The tears, the therapy sessions, the workouts that left me breathless, the slow process of remembering who I was before I became half of a couple. I thought about Matt, probably getting ready in his apartment across town, preparing to walk into what had to be the most awkward social situation of his life just to support me. "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The Hamptons venue was exactly what I'd expected. Emma always had expensive taste, and apparently stolen fiancés come with stolen dreams too. The Topping Rose House in Bridgehampton, the same beachfront resort where Jake and I had talked about having our own wedding. The same place where we'd spent a weekend 2 summers ago, lying on the beach, talking about our future, making lists of everything we wanted our wedding to be. Intimate but elegant. Classic but not stuffy. A place where our families could come together and celebrate the beginning of something beautiful. Now I was pulling up the circular driveway, as a guest at someone else's version of that dream. Matt sensed my hesitation as we sat in the car watching other guests make their way toward the welcome reception. "We can leave any time you want," he said quietly, squeezing my hand. "Literally, any time. Just say the word." I took a deep breath, checking my reflection one last time in the passenger mirror. The red dress looked even better than I remembered. Sophie had been right about the power of good tailoring. My hair was perfect thanks to an early morning appointment with her stylist. My makeup was flawless but natural, designed to look like I'd woken up this beautiful. But I was done running, done hiding, done letting other people's choices dictate my story. "Let's do this," I said. The welcome cocktail party was being held on the resort's famous lawn overlooking the ocean. String lights were woven through the trees, and there were flowers everywhere, white roses and peonies that probably cost more than most people's rent. A jazz quartet was playing near the bar, and servers in crisp white shirts were circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was beautiful, exactly the kind of wedding I would have planned for myself. I could feel the shift in energy the moment we walked in. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Someone definitely gasped. The red dress was doing its job, but more than that, I was doing my job. Standing tall, smiling, confidently, looking like a woman who belonged exactly where she was. I recognized most of the guests. College friends, work colleagues, family members I'd known for years. People who'd watched my relationship with Jake unfold, who'd celebrated our engagement, who'd probably spent the last 6 months gossiping about what had happened between us. Emma spotted me first. She was standing near the bar with a group of her work friends looking absolutely stunning in a flowing white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Even from across the lawn, I could see her face go through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise guilt, something that might have been fear then, that practiced smile she'd perfected during her years in fashion marketing. Jake was harder to spot at first. When I finally saw him, he was standing by the seafood station with his groomsmen, and when our eyes met across the crowd, he actually took a step backward. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him remember what he threw away. "Melanie," Emma's voice was pitched too high as she approached us, her smile so bright it could have powered the entire resort. She was moving fast, like she wanted to control the narrative of our first interaction. "You came, and you look, wow, absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I said smoothly, accepting the air kiss she offered. "The dress is vintage Diane von Furstenberg. Emma, this is Matt. Matt, meet Emma the bride." I watched Emma size up Matt, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. He was gorgeous, obviously successful, and the way he looked at me made it clear this wasn't some random date I'd grabbed to make Jake jealous. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that brought out his eyes, and when he smiled at Emma, it was polite but not overly warm. "It's so nice to meet you," Emma said, but her voice had that fake sweetness that meant she was completely thrown off her game. "How do you two know each other?" "We met a few weeks ago," Matt said easily, slipping his arm around my waist in a gesture that felt both protective and natural. Mel literally swept me off my feet. Well, technically she knocked me over, but same result. The casual way he called me Mel, the genuine warmth in his voice when he talked about our meeting, the protective way his hand rested on the small of my back. Emma caught all of it, and I could see it eating her alive. That's wonderful," she said, and I could tell she was trying to figure out how serious this was. Whether Matt was just a prop in my revenge fantasy or something real. "I'm so happy you found someone." "I'm happy too," I said, and I realized I actually meant it. Jake finally worked up the courage to approach us. He looked good, I had to admit. The navy suit brought out his blue eyes, and he'd gotten a haircut that made him look older. more sophisticated. But when he said my name, just hearing it in his voice made my skin crawl. Mel, he said, and there was something in his expression that might have been regret. I'm glad you're here. I wasn't sure that I'd show up, I finished. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The conversation was awkward as hell, but I held my ground. Matt was incredible making small talk, like this was the most normal situation in the world. He asked Jake about work, complimented Emma's dress, played the part of the perfect boyfriend meeting the ex for the first time. I could see other guests watching us, trying to figure out the dynamics. College friends who remembered when Emma and I were inseparable. Work colleagues who'd known about the engagement. Family members who'd probably taken sides when everything fell apart. The real test came at the rehearsal dinner the next night. The entire wedding party was seated at a long table on the resort's terrace overlooking the ocean. I'd been placed strategically at the far end, as far from the happy couple as possible, while still being included. Emma had clearly been drinking, and alcohol always made her say things she shouldn't. She stood up halfway through dinner to give a speech about love and friendship and finding your soulmate, and I swear she looked directly at me when she talked about how sometimes you have to fight for what you want. Love isn't always convenient, she said, swaying slightly as she held her champagne glass. Sometimes it shows up when you least expect it, with someone you never imagined. Some people might think it's wrong to follow your heart when it leads you somewhere complicated. The table was dead silent. Everyone knew the subtext. Everyone understood exactly who that speech was really directed at. But when you know, she continued, her voice getting stronger. And Jake and I, we know. We know that what we have is real and rare and worth fighting for. That's when Matt did something I'll never forget. He stood up, raised his glass, and said, "To Emma and Jake, may your marriage be everything you both deserve." The emphasis on deserve was subtle, but unmistakable. A few people caught it and smirked. Emma's face went pale. Even Jake looked uncomfortable. And to second chances, Matt continued, looking at me with such genuine affection that I felt my heart skip. Sometimes losing what you think you want leads you to what you actually need. The crowd actually applauded. People were nodding, raising their glasses. Matt had somehow managed to acknowledge the elephant in the room while taking the high road, and everyone in that tent knew exactly what he meant. After dinner, I needed some air. The whole evening had been emotionally exhausting, and I wanted a few minutes to decompress before heading back to our room. I was standing on the resort's wraparound porch, looking out at the ocean, when Emma found me. The fake smile was gone, replaced by something desperate and ugly. "What are you trying to prove, Mel?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so the other guests wouldn't hear. "That you can show up here with some random guy and pretend you're over it?" "I'm not pretending anything," I said calmly, not bothering to turn around and face her. "I am over it. Over you, over Jake, over caring what either of you think about my choices." "You don't mean that." She moved to stand beside me, and I could smell the wine on her breath. "You can't mean that." "Don't I turned to face her fully, and for the first time all weekend I let her see exactly what I was thinking. "Emma, you did me a favor. You showed me exactly who you are and exactly what kind of man Jake is. A man who would cheat on his fiancé with her best friend isn't someone I want to build a life with." For a moment her mask slipped completely. I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like regret, or maybe fear. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she whispered. "But you're not sorry it did." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You want to know what's funny?" I continued. "I spent months wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently to keep Jake, whether I was too focused on my career, too independent, not supportive enough." Emma was crying now, mascara starting to smudge under her eyes. "But the truth is, I didn't do anything wrong. You two did. You chose to betray someone who loved you both. You chose to build your happiness on someone else's pain. And now, you get to live with that choice for the rest of your lives." "Mel, please, enjoy tomorrow," I said, heading back toward the party. enjoy your wedding, your marriage, your life. But don't expect me to pretend we're friends anymore. That woman died the day you decided to betray her. Walking away from Emma that night felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. I found Matt on the terrace, looking out at the ocean, and when he turned to smile at me, I realized something that hit me like lightning. I wasn't just over Jake and Emma. I was falling for someone new, someone real, someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. "How are you doing?" he asked, pulling me into his arms. "Better than I thought I would be," I said honestly. "Thank you for being here, for all of this." "There's nowhere else than I'd rather be," he said, and when he kissed me under the string lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the fake kind you force on yourself after reading too many self-help books, but real deep in your bones peace. Whatever happened today, I knew I'd be okay. Matt and I met for coffee at this little cafe in East Hampton before getting ready. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, and for the first time all weekend, I felt genuinely relaxed. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans, his hair still messy from sleep, and I was struck by how comfortable this felt. How right. "How are you really doing with all this?" he asked, reaching across the small table to take my hand. "Better than I thought I would be," I said honestly. Last night, talking to Emma, I realized something. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," he said, tracing circles on my palm with his thumb. "Sometimes the best revenge is just being happy." We spent the morning walking along the beach, talking about everything and nothing. Matt told me about his childhood in Vermont, growing up in a house full of artists where creativity was valued above everything else. I told him about my family, my overbearing but loving parents, who still couldn't understand why I'd chosen advertising over law school. "My mom's going to love you," I found myself saying, then immediately felt embarrassed. We'd known each other for 3 weeks. It was way too early to be talking about meeting parents. But Matt just smiled. "I'd love to meet her," he said simply, and something in my chest loosened. The ceremony was being held on the beach at sunset. I had to admit, it was beautiful. Emma had always had impeccable taste, and she'd outdone herself. White chairs arranged in perfect rows on the sand, an arch of white roses, and eucalyptus facing the ocean string lights, ready to twinkle as the sun went down. Emma looked stunning in her dress, all flowing silk and delicate lace that caught the breeze perfectly. The dress was everything she'd always dreamed of, everything we'd talked about during those late-night conversations in college, when we'd plan our imaginary weddings. Jake was handsome in his tuxedo, the same designer tux he'd tried on for our wedding that never happened. I remembered going with him to that fitting, how excited he'd been, how he'd insisted on the bow tie, even though I'd preferred the regular tie. Matt and I were seated in the third row, close enough to see everything, but far enough back to avoid the most awkward moments. As the music started and the wedding party began their processional, I felt Matt's hand find mine. The ceremony itself was standard. Traditional vows readings from Corinthians about love being patient and kind, which felt especially ironic given the circumstances. The officiant spoke about the sanctity of marriage, about commitment and faithfulness, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. But something strange happened during the vows. Emma started crying, and not the pretty happy tears you'd expect from a bride. These were ugly, desperate tears that made her mascara run despite what must have been professional waterproof makeup. "I promise to love you completely," she said to Jake, her voice breaking in a way that made everyone in the audience shift uncomfortably. "To be honest with you always, even when it's hard, even when I've made mistakes that I can't take back." Jake looked confused, but he pressed on with his own vows. Standard stuff about partnership and devotion and building a life together. Nothing that sounded particularly heartfelt. Nothing that suggested he understood the weight of what Emma had just said. Then came the part where the officiant asked if anyone had objections to this union. It's usually just a formality, something left over from when marriages were more about property, than love. But Emma suddenly turned around and looked directly at me. The entire beach went silent. 200 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Actually, she said, her voice carrying across the sand, I have something I need to say. The entire wedding party froze. Jake's face went white. The officiant looked like he wanted to disappear into the sand. Emma's mother started making distressed noises from the front row. I need to apologize, Emma continued, still looking at me, to someone who should have been standing up here with me today, not sitting out there watching me marry the man she loved. You could have heard a pin drop. The only sound was the waves crashing against the shore and someone's grandmother asking loudly what was happening. Melanie, Emma said, and her voice was shaking now. I stole your life. I stole your fiancé. I destroyed our friendship, and I convinced myself I was in love when what I really was jealous. Jealous of how happy you were, how sure of yourself you seemed, how easily love came to you. Jake tried to interrupt, grabbing Emma's arm and whispering something urgent in her ear, but Emma shook him off. No, let me finish, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. I've been carrying this guilt for months and I can't start a marriage built on someone else's pain. She turned back to Jake, and what she said next shocked everyone, including me. I can't marry you, Jake, not like this. Not when I know I pursued you because I wanted what Melanie had, not because I actually wanted you. The beach erupted in chaos. Jake was shouting, demanding to know what she was talking about. Emma's mother was crying. Her father was trying to calm everyone down. Guests were pulling out their phones to record what was turning into the most dramatic wedding fail in Hampton's history. You're not thinking clearly, Jake said, desperation creeping into his voice. It's just nerves. We can work through this. No, we can't, Emma said, pulling off her engagement ring and placing it in his hand. Because I don't love you, Jake. I love the idea of you. I love what you represented. But I don't love you. She walked toward me, then her dress trailing in the sand makeup streaming down her face. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone too shocked to do anything but stare. I know you'll probably never forgive me, she said when she reached my row. But I needed you to know that losing your friendship was the worst part of all this. You deserved so much better than what I did to you. For a moment, I considered staying silent, letting her suffer with the weight of what she'd done, making her live with the consequences of her choices the way I'd had to live with them. But that's not who I am anymore. That's not who I want to be. I forgive you, Emma, I said, quietly, standing up to face her. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but also right. Like I was finally letting go of something I'd been carrying for too long. Matt helped me up from my chair, and we walked away from the chaos together. Behind us, I could hear Jake demanding answers, guests gossiping about what they just witnessed, Emma's family, trying to figure out what to do with 200 disappointed wedding guests and a reception that no one knew whether to attend. We didn't look back. Later that night, we were walking along the beach near our hotel. The wedding that wasn't was probably still being discussed in shocked whispers at the resort bar. But out here, with just the sound of waves and the smell of salt air, it felt like we were in our own world. Can I tell you something? Matt said, stopping suddenly. Always. When I met you that day outside the gym, you were this broken, beautiful woman who'd been treated terribly by people who should have protected you. But even then, even at your lowest point, there was this strength in you that took my breath away. He turned to face me fully, and in the moonlight, I could see everything he was feeling written across his face. Today, watching you handle all that drama with such grace, seeing you forgive someone who didn't deserve it, I realized something. I'm falling in love with you, Melanie Carson, not the woman you were before Jake, not the woman you became after him, but exactly who you are right now in this moment. I'd been holding my breath, but at his words, everything inside me released. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered, and when he kissed me on that beach with the sound of waves crashing around us and the taste of salt air on our lips, I understood something profound about second chances and new beginnings. Sometimes losing the person you thought was your forever leads you to the person who actually is. Emma and Jake's wedding became a cautionary tale that people still talk about at dinner parties across Manhattan. They broke up 2 weeks later, surprise to absolutely no one. Emma moved to California, got a job at a startup in Silicon Valley, and last I heard she was in therapy working through her issues with jealousy and self-worth. Jake bounced around for a while, tried dating someone from his CrossFit gym, but couldn't seem to settle down with anyone. Matt and we're planning our own wedding now. Nothing fancy, just our closest friends and family in Central Park near the Alice in Wonderland statue, where we had our second date. Sophie's designing my dress. Carmen's training me to walk down the aisle without tripping, and my therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, will probably cry harder than my mother. The difference is, when we promise to love each other forever, we'll both mean it. When we say we choose each other, it'll be because we actually want to be together, not because we're trying to fill some void or prove something to the world, because real love doesn't require theft or betrayal or drama. Real love just requires two people brave enough to choose each other every single day, even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when the world tries to tell them they're making a mistake. And that's a choice I'm happy to make. So here's what I learned from having my best friend steal my fiancé and then inviting me to watch their train wreck of a wedding. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually need. And sometimes, just sometimes, showing up for yourself is the most powerful thing you can do. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between staying bitter or choosing peace? Have you ever had someone in your life who betrayed your trust, and you had to decide whether to let that define you or use it to become stronger? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you handle betrayal? What helped you move forward? And if you're going through something similar right now, remember this: you're stronger than you think you deserve, better than you're getting. And sometimes, the best revenge really is just living well. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from. Until next time, remember you don't need anyone's permission to choose yourself.